You're listening to Pro Community, a Socius podcast, the show where online community meets business performance.
Welcome to episode number 13 of Pro Community, the show where online community meets business performance. I'm Josh Paul. You can see all the episodes of Pro Community at socius.com. You can also subscribe to this show as an audio podcast in iTunes. I'm very pleased to have with me today Nir Eyal, investor, entrepreneur, and educator, and author of the upcoming book Hooked, on how to drive engagement by creating user habits. Welcome, Nir.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being on the show. There's a lot I want to get to today in a short period of time, because the concepts that and the realities that you're bringing to the forefront are make and break, product realities for a lot of companies. A lot of organizations are going to fail if people are not engaged and using their product. So there's a lot of great information that I want to try to fit in. And let's start off by talking about what are high engagement products and why should business people care?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So a lot of my experience in this field comes out of personal experiences. And so at my last company was at the intersection of advertising and gaming, and I saw this growth in companies that had unbelievable engagement. These kind of I call them WTF businesses, that they just come out of nowhere. They all look like toys. They all look like cute little products that you see once or twice, and you kind of think you've seen them before, or an idea like it, and then all of a sudden they're huge. And these companies don't get big through traditional marketing. Right? They don't get big through, just buying a lot of ads. They get big by having products that are highly engaging to users, and where users engage other users typically. And so when you think about these products, you think about Facebook, you think about the growth of Zynga, you think about Twitter, you think about these companies that got very big very quickly and create a lot of value. Sometimes they can't hold on to that value, as sometimes we see in the market. But those were kind of the models that I wanted to understand. How do these companies create such high engagement products and hold on to users? And fundamentally, how do they change behavior so dramatically? I mean, the things we do today with our technologies as compared to 5 years ago are so dramatically different, right? And I couldn't even have told you 5 years ago, hey, there's this thing that you build a profile on this page and you're going to share all this stuff with your friends. Like, you wouldn't need that, right? You wouldn't have said, oh yeah, can you go build that for me? And yet a few years later, 1 in every 8 people on the planet use Facebook. And so that's what I really want to study. How are there patterns around building high engagement products?
And one of the reasons I was so excited to talk to you is that we work with online communities, providing online community software for companies, customer communities, and membership organizations. And the reality is those online communities, those private online communities, are extensions of the organization's product strategy. When somebody's looking at 2 different products, they're similar products, but one of them comes with a very active and engaged community, to support them, to share ideas. That's a big differentiator. And if that community sinks, if nobody's using that community, if it's a ghost town, if people are not engaged, then that part of the product strategy can do more damage than it can good. So that's, bringing the engagement factor from, it covers consumer apps, mobile apps, and just in communities. And that's something that drew me to you. So when we're talking about designing addictive products, is the focus more on technology or is it on human behavior?
Yeah. So I think it's part and parcel. I think behaviors are individual actions which lead to routines. Routines lead to habits, and habits lead to who we are. Right? The things we do day to day, about 50% of what we do every day is just done out of routines and habits. And so what we're seeing is that technology makes habits possible in a way that's never been possible before. That I kind of call them the three horsemen of addictive technology, which is data, access, and speed. So never before have we had the kind of access to people because of these devices that are in our pockets that give us access to the world and give companies access to us. And never has there been the amount of personalized data available that there is today. And there's never been the transmission speeds that's been available that we have today. So this combination of these three things makes for a world where products can be a lot more sticky. Right? They can be a lot more engaging because the loops that customers can go through can be done a lot faster. And one of those loops that we can discuss later is this desire engine that I use to describe the four phases of high engagement products. It also means, and a big part of why I write what I write and the research I do, is that we need to be aware as consumers, right? That okay, we're business people, and we have business goals and we have objectives, but we're also human beings, and we have kids and we have families, and I'm concerned, frankly, about how much more addictive the world is becoming, and whether we have the antidotes and the vaccines to make sure that we can protect ourselves from technologies that are moving faster than we're adapting to.
What might those look like? What might, to get into the societal question, what might, is it education? Is it regulation? Is it?
Yeah. I love this. I love this question because I think it's a real problem when we dig into almost anybody I know out here in Silicon Valley. When you really start to prod, we all love technology, and yet we all hate it in a way. Right? Like we all feel overwhelmed by how many emails we have. We all feel overwhelmed by the amount of content that we feel pressured to consume. We all feel like we can't get enough done even though we're supposed to be more efficient doing it because of all these great tools. And I think that's because everything is becoming more addictive, more engaging, which is in a way a good thing. But we also need to inoculate ourselves and build awareness around how to make sure that we're not sucked in and stop living the lives we really want to live. So the answer to that, one of it is awareness. So a big part of why I do what I do is that when you understand why products are engaging, right, why they become habit forming and sometimes addictive, you not only can build those products for good, right, to create healthy habits and healthy behaviors, but you can also break those behaviors in yourself. So a lot of things that I've done in my life now, I've done because of the realization of, wow, I'm really not in control as much as I think I am. So I've had to do a few things. Like one, actually understand the phases of what creates a habit product and start breaking those apart. So one example, I found that I had a lot of trouble shutting off my computer at night. I'd have dinner, come home or have dinner with my family, and get to work after I put my daughter down to sleep. And 10 o'clock would come around, and 10:30 would pass, and 11 would pass. Soon it would be midnight, and I couldn't get to bed on time, and then my next day would be ruined. So I had to actually take some pretty severe measures to break what I call the desire engine, to place barriers between the trigger and the action. So I actually bought a $3 timer at Home Depot that's connected to my router, and at 10 o'clock my router shuts off, so that I don't have to think about or use any of my willpower reserves to stop using the computer, right? Stop checking one more email or one more interesting thing on the web. So that's an example of how I really had to build in, tools to give me the freedom I want back in my life from these technologies.
Interesting. It sounds like the driver, in the center of all this is just a finite amount of time. So engagement can be good, but the reality is we all have just a finite amount of time, and prioritizing it and understanding that while we're in the desire cycle to continue to engage, there are it may be taking us away from other things that are healthy for us and important for us to do.
I should mention, I don't think that addicting people or awareness of, oh, we don't want to make this product too engaging because it might addict people. I actually don't think that's the biggest problem most companies have, right? Like, I think that's a moral consideration, right? I absolutely think we all should consider, we should never addict people. Addiction is about unhealthy compulsions. We should never addict people. But forming habits, I think, is okay. Habits can actually help us be more productive by not making us think about every decision. I think there's a massive opportunity, particularly in enterprise software, to make things more engaging because they suck. They're so boring and so unengaging that it's laborious to use them. So in that instance, I think there's a massive opportunity to make those things more engaging. Right?
I agree.
And there's lots of lessons to be learned. And what I tend to study is the consumer side, whose entire business model flies or dies based on high engagement. So those guys are really the pros of building engagement. And so I study those patterns so that not only can we make more consumer goods, but also maybe bring those to products that really should be a lot more engaging.
So what are some of your favorite examples of habit-forming behavior in mobile apps or social communities?
Well, I think the mother of all habit-forming technologies is email. And we don't think of email being that innovative until we think back, I guess maybe 15 years. Like none of us used it. And I remember, when email was available on the phone, a lot of people were like, oh no, I don't want one of those new phones with emails because I don't want to be attached. And you just can't say that anymore, right? Everybody has access to email. And particularly email on the phone is a great example because I think it's a perfect embodiment of these 4 steps of the Desire Engine, which very simply you can remember with the acronym ATARI. I don't know if you used Atari back in the 80s, the gaming system Atari, ATA. So A, Desire Engine, has a trigger, T is a trigger, action, reward, and investment. And so those 4 steps, the quicker you can go through those 4 steps, the higher the velocity of trigger, action, reward, and investment. And the more frequent you can do that cycle, the more quickly you will build a link between a problem and a solution in the customer's mind. And that's really what the Desire Engine is all about. So with email, the trigger can either be an external trigger, like you got an email, and so now you're prompted to check it. But it can also be an internal trigger. How often do we check email, even when we have no messages, but because we feel an emotional trigger, right? So we're bored, we're waiting in an elevator, and we're uncomfortably close to somebody. We're doing something that's difficult at work, and we just want to escape for a minute and still feel productive. So in a way, this technology fulfills more than just a functional need. It fills an emotional need, right? So that's that trigger phase. The action is then actually opening the email. The reward is interesting in that email, along with many other technologies, provides a variable reward. And so this is something that's not usually discussed outside of the gaming business. But variable rewards are fascinating. Variable rewards come out of the work of B.F. Skinner back in the 1950s and 60s, where he saw that animals, in his case he used pigeons, that pigeons were given a predictable reward. For example, here's a food pellet. Every time you click the lever, the pigeon would click the lever when it was hungry. But when it had variable rewards, he called them intermittent rewards. When intermittent rewards were given to the pigeon, and one time they would click the lever, they would get a pellet. The next time they would click the lever, they'd get nothing. The next time they'd get 2 or 3 pellets. This caused incessant clicking. And so in high engagement products, we always see some element of variability.
See, that's something that I want to talk to you about because, variable rewards, in classical thinking, I would think that it would lead to frustration. I'm not getting what I need every time. But in your writing and in your work, it's a big driver of engagement. So, is it a usability and personalization fail, or is it a driver of engagement?
Well, it definitely does lead to frustration when it's in the extreme. It needs to be in the right flow. So Csikszentmihalyi talks about this concept of flow, that it's the appropriate level of challenge and skill, that there's a degree of variability in the right way. But that degree of variability is something that can be tuned, right? You can tune how often the reward is received. You can tune the amplitude of the reward, right? So how great the reward can be. And you can also tune the type of reward. So there's three types of reward. Rewards of the tribe, rewards of the hunt, and rewards of the self. And you can mix and match these different types of rewards so that the user stays engaged. And it turns out that a lot of companies can successfully leverage multiple types of these reward systems.
I mean, that's really interesting. So let's get into investment, and then we'll get into where this fits in the product development process.
Sure. So the investment phase is that last step of the Desire Engine, the I in the Atari acronym. And investment is all about getting the user to do a bit of work. And that bit of work has a few reasons to it. One, it's loading the next trigger. Okay? So in an email, when you send an email, to me in the Desire Engine, that's not the action phase because it doesn't immediately follow reward. Sending an email is about the future anticipation of reward. It's about going through the Desire Engine cycle next time. You don't get every time you send an email, you don't get stars and points or anything, right? You don't even get social feedback immediately. It's about the anticipation of future reward, and you're investing in the system every time you use it. The other things it does, it builds preference. So the more work we put into a system, it turns out the more highly we value it, that we endow our labor more highly. So if you think of a Pinterest or Twitter, when we collect followers, when we create work, right, when we create something of value to us, we tend to endow that with value. And so a lot of companies that kind of come and go, they do everything right where they have a trigger, they have an action, they even have a reward, but they don't create an investment that gets the user to put value into the system. And that makes it very easy for the user to leave. So I think that fourth crucial step of putting value into the system is what makes this Desire Engine work.
I think what you're talking about is so important, but it makes my head hurt a little bit. I read your material, I read your work, I listen to you when you speak, and I find myself having to put it down every 3 minutes to go, because the concepts are so big and important, and they build on one another. I have to pause the video on YouTube or on your site every few minutes to go check my communities to make sure that, do I have this? Is this because it's such an important reality that and the concepts that you're bringing, but it is very just a new way of thinking that I don't. Let me ask you: Do business people get it?
We all get it. It's interesting. Every time I write on TechCrunch or on my blog post, not every time, but maybe every other time, I get a comment that says, why do we need all this psychology? Just build good stuff, right? Just make good product.
It's that simple.
It's that simple, and that's absolutely true. And you know what? That's why this stuff works so well. Like, that's why this is such an important topic, because to you and me, we just feel like, well, it just works. Like, it's just so obvious that, like, Facebook is great, and Twitter's great, and email's great. It's just so easy. The thing is, when you lift the hood, this is what's going on. This is the pattern that these products are following, whether you know it or not. It's just like the fact that, hamburgers and French fries at McDonald's taste great, right? They're awesome. They're wonderful. But when you start talking about, how good carbohydrates taste and fats taste and sugars taste and, the science behind the color of the food and the presentation of the food, you realize it's a lot more complicated than what you see on the surface. And I think that's what we're starting to realize with the web is that we've gone through this glorious process of seeing a lot of great products invented that just work, that are just magical. But everything magical, everything that we can't explain starts out as magical before we can understand the science behind it. And I think there's a whole movement right now with people trying to explain where great products come from, where great companies come from. So thought leaders like Eric Ries and Steve Blank are trying to break down how these products iterate to find solutions. But the hole I'm trying to fill is, how do you find the hypotheses to try and test in the first place? So when you're thinking, okay, how can I improve my product, or how do I bring my vision to fruition, I'm hoping that this framework can help provide some constraints to say, wow, if I need a high engagement product, how am I doing these 4 things? Where can I put these in my flow? Doesn't mean your whole user flow needs to be, one desire engine after another, but it means if you can insert in strategic places, you build a hook, right? You build something that the user wants to come back to, and I think people know it's there, right? We all feel it. We all feel drawn to our email. We feel the itch to check our products, but we don't exactly know why. And that's frankly why I do what I do, is because I'm really curious to understand why as well.
And it's understanding the psychology and the psychological elements behind addictive behavior can be very lucrative for B2C and B2B companies.
Yeah.
So where should designing habits fall in an organization's product development priorities?
Well, I think you need a few things before you start thinking about habit design. I think you need a vision, right? You need to think of the change you want to make in the world. And I don't think that's something we should take lightly. So if you have a real vision that you're passionate about, if you have a business model, right? So you need to, and when I say business model, I'm referring to Alex Osterwalder's work. If you haven't seen it, it's excellent. I highly recommend the book Business Model Generation, where he basically talks about the 9 pieces of every business model. So it very simply lays out the canvas. So here's the fundamental elements of your business. After you have that, you need to have a process. So what I do, habit design, is actually useless unless it's testable. But once you have a process, I'm partial to the lean startup process, but there's lots of other processes. Once you have a process to scientifically test a hypothesis to see if it actually had the desired result, then you're ready for me, right? Then you can bring in, if you have those elements, you can bring in my thinking and say, okay, great. How can we create higher engagement, because our business model depends on it? Where can we build this into the product? You can generate a few hypotheses with these models and say, okay, wow, we figured out that what's lacking in our product is the reward, let's say, right? The variable reward is not variable enough, it's not frequent enough perhaps. How can we build hypotheses to create that, right? How can we use rewards of the tribe, rewards of the hunt, rewards of the self to increase the value of those rewards? Then you can go back to your product, test it. You can do a split test and say, okay, we have this new idea we'd like to put into the product, split test it and see if it works. So that's if you have an existing product. If you have a brand new product, assuming you have the vision and the business model, you can use this as a design constraint, right? You can say, okay, where in the product flow can we put these desire engines?
Okay, so it can be integrated into existing products as well as products that are being built from the ground up. Yeah,
and there's also one more application that people don't like to hear about, but I have to say, is that I think this habit design stuff that I work on can help you decide if you need to pivot. And I think that's something that people don't do enough.
I agree. I agree.
So 2 of the most the criteria that you need to think about first in terms of if you have a business model that needs a habit, and by the way, disclaimer, not every business model needs a habit. If you're an SEM-driven business and you need companies to come, or you need customers to come to your site, buy a product, check out, and go, you don't need to design habits, right? You don't need frequent engagement. But if you're a company that does require frequent engagement and you can't afford to constantly pay for marketing to get people there, then you need to consider engagement. So that being said, if you need high engagement products, you must have enough frequency and utility to create that habit. So if the customer doesn't find the product useful enough perceived utility, or doesn't use it frequently enough, you're going to have a very tough time building a habit. And so frequency becomes very, very important. You have to get people to need the product often to ever create a habit.
So the concept is very dense, but when you are going through looking at a specific product and going through the process that you're talking about, each decision and each element is actually pretty straightforward. Do you have this? Do you, is there enough reward? What kind of reward? And it's pretty digestible once you bring it down to an actual product.
Yeah, that's my hope.
I'm pulling for you.
Thanks.
So talk for a second about why marketing, some people think about, this is just for designers. This is just for user interface people. But why is marketing, design, and product management all really important to this process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think one, design isn't about pixels anymore, right? Like graphic design and interaction design is such a small part of the puzzle, right? It's one piece of the business. You need the person who can make things look good and easy to use, right? That's a very important component. But design today is really about the experience, right? Like everyone's product, if we're talking about tech products, it's really about designing an experience while you have the user with you. And I think that's everyone's responsibility, right? Like that is your product, is the experience. And so that's where design really matters. And so that's something that I don't think can be relegated to just the graphic designer. That's too big of a job. It's something that requires a business perspective. It's something that requires a marketing perspective to know that you're giving the customer something that they value. And of course, it requires expertise on how to make the product more usable.
What is, there was a curve that you talk about that talks about ability. What is it? MABA. Can you talk for a second about that?
So that second phase of the design engine, the action phase, is all about getting people to do singular actions. So how do I get that one action that I'm looking for someone to do? Typically, it's a login, a scroll, a search, that key action that comes before the reward. And I utilized some work from BJ Fogg, who's a researcher at Stanford, who has this very simple model that helps us understand why we do the things we do. And BJ posits that all behavior comes from a place where there's sufficient motivation, sufficient ability, so how easy something is, and a trigger. So he has this formula. It's not math, but it's just a formula that says B equals behavior. So behavior equals motivation, ability, and a trigger at the same time. So if you think about, last time you didn't pick up your telephone, right? So telephone rings and you didn't pick it up. Either your motivation was too low because you said, oh, it's a telemarketer, I'm not going to pick that up. Your ability was too low. So let's say the phone was across the room and you couldn't get to it in time. It was too difficult to get there. Or the trigger wasn't present. So maybe the phone was on vibrate and you couldn't hear it. So whenever we create a behavior, we need motivation, ability, and a trigger. And this is partially why cross-functional teams work so well, because motivation is really the realm of marketing. Ability is really the realm of product design, making the product easy to use. Like, does it solve the customer's problem in an easier way? Does it reduce time, cognitive load, physical effort, etc.? And then triggers. So that's interaction design. Is it clear that there's a clear call to action for what to do next?
Now, that was a concept I really connected with, how marketing, interaction design, and product management all play a part in this, so it's not just the designer or the coder. Now, conventional wisdom says that you should make a user do as little as possible, as little work as possible to achieve their goal in order to have a successful product. Why might that not be the best approach for keeping your users engaged?
Yeah, so I think that is the right approach for that action phase. So back to Atari, the desire engine model, so T is trigger, action, reward, and investment. In the action phase, I think that's true. Because we want to get the user as quickly from that action phase, from the login, from the search, from the scroll, into the reward, right? Knowing here's why you came, here's the reward that you came for, as quickly as possible. So in action, make it as easy as possible. That's kind of the conventional design wisdom. Make it slick. However, in the investment phase, that's not always the best strategy. Because when it comes to engaging products, remember, our flow isn't linear anymore, right? A linear flow is come to the page, find what you want, put it in your cart, and check out. That's linear. And get out, right? Leave the page. And we want to make that all easy. But that's not very engaging, right? That doesn't create an itch to make me want to come back. Because high engagement products are loops. They're not linear. So that investment phase is where we don't necessarily want things to be super easy. We want the user to do a bit of work, right? We want the user to invest in the product by storing some kind of value. So as I was referring to before, something that they're creating, that they're investing in, that they're spending a little bit of labor on to invest into the system. So on Pinterest, for example, right? Pinterest is doing phenomenally well. You're creating a pin board, right? That tiny investment of pinning something or repinning something or liking something or sharing something or commenting on, I'm building a little portfolio, right? I'm building my little page. And those little bits of investment is critical, right? That's a stored value for the user that brings them back. And it also reloads the trigger for next time.
We measure a lot of those, in our customer communities that we provide for companies. We measure a lot of the level of engagement, as far as how invested people are by completeness of the profile, or do they complete a certain field that that we put in there for that purpose in the profile? Have they invested in responding to another customer's question? Those kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to wrap this up with two questions. First is, I'm an executive. I'm listening to what you're saying, and I really like what you're saying. I have some existing products today, maybe some new products on the horizon. What are some first steps that my company can take to create more engagement in my online or mobile products? Well, where do I start? I think it's great, other than reading everything you've ever written.
So yeah, go check out nearandfar.com. That would be great, and you can get some tools there. At some point, this book that I'm writing will be available, so that'll be kind of a more digestible format. That'll be out next year. In the meantime, I think this basic framework of figuring out the key questions for each one of the 4 steps of the Desire Engine, right? So understanding, what does the customer actually want? What's their trigger? What do they have to do when they get there? How are they rewarded? How can they put value into the system? That's really what the Desire Engine is asking. So as heady as it is, and as many studies that I can show you why this is true, those 4 questions are really what it's all about. And the more places you can figure out how to cycle users to answering those 4 questions, the more engaging your product will be.
Can that happen? Can that cycle happen multiple times, within a use of a product, or should it be spread out across the user's engagement, online time with that product?
Absolutely. So the best products are the ones that have multiple Desire Engines, right? That have a separate Desire Engine. For example, with Twitter. Twitter has a Desire Engine for you as a consumer, but it also has a Desire Engine for you as a creator. So many people never tweet, right? They just consume from other people's tweets. They build people they follow, and they consume the tweets. There's a different Desire Engine with different actions, different rewards, different investments for those people who are building an audience. And so those products that can take people through different stages and can take people from visitors to eventually become elders, to help other people in their community, to build social rewards for other people in the community, do incredibly well.
Wow. So if you do a lot of speaking, you're increasingly doing more speaking as more and more people connect with what you're saying. When you're speaking to a room full of executives or entrepreneurs or product people, what is the one takeaway you want them to leave the room with?
The one takeaway, and this isn't going to be, I don't know how satisfying it's going to be, because I'm guessing people want, okay, how do I get engagement? Tell me the secret. I think there's a bigger question to answer before you do that, because there's one thing that you can do that greatly increases your odds of success, and that's scratch your own itch. That there's a product category of products that create habits, that create high engagement, but that you're doing because you believe they materially improve people's lives and you're a user. And that intersection, right, of things that you really believe improves people's lives and you use, is where you'll find your highest chance of success. So you'll make better hypotheses around what to test. You can use all my stuff around triggers and actions and rewards and investment, but you won't really know what's the best hypothesis to test in each one of those categories, because you won't know what's authentic to your community. So if you can build, and we don't always have this luxury, but I argue actually we do. We can choose what we will work on, even if we are working for clients, even if we are working for a big company. You can choose what's meaningful to you, and what you resonate with and what you would use. And I would say that's the best thing you can do to increase your odds of success in creating a high engagement product.
I think that's a good note to end on. I'm often jealous of a lot of the marketing companies, marketing software companies out there, because they not only sell their product, but they use their product and they create really good products by using it, and testing it, and then it also helps them sell it. So Nir, I want to thank you again for sharing your research and your insight and your experience with us today. I hope once the book is out, we can do this again sometime.
Would love to. Thank you so much. Appreciate you having me.
Before we go, you mentioned nirandfar.com. Where else can people find you on the web, or is that the primary place?
Nir and Far. Nir is spelled N-I-R, like my first name, so nirandfar.com, and occasionally write for TechCrunch, Forbes, and Psychology Today.
Okay, well, we covered a lot of great information, and we will link to as much as we can from the show notes. As always, you can see all of the episodes of Pro Community at socius.com/procommunity. You can also subscribe to the show in an audio podcast format on iTunes, where great reviews and 5-star ratings are appreciated. Nir, I want to thank you once again, and have a great day.
Thank you. You too.